Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Legend of Ben on PokerStars.
I'm one of your other hosts, East Coast Sam.
And for this entire podcast, we have asked for anybody to volunteer if they were in these episodes to join us, whether they were a main character or a background player or whatever. But to much of our delight, we have the man who warmed the hearts of poker audiences on ESPN everywhere, the man who is unstoppable, the only man in the world to call Cliff Josephie scum, the only man to massage a dealer while all in, and the man who dealt with the ramblings and stallings of Will Kassouf. Over $1 million in lifetime winnings in the main event alone, Mr. Michael Niwinski.
Thank you, Ben. That was quite the intro. You've been practicing over there.
I've been ready for this. I'm excited to have you here. We recently covered the 2016 World Series of Poker main event broadcast on ESPN. And as much as we have covered those 16 episodes, there is so much story and so much poker that cannot be encapsulated in 16 hours of poker. So we're so glad to have you here to tell us what your perspective was on your legendary 15th place finish in that main event.
Yeah, it was a very fun run. There's obviously a ton of stuff that you don't really see behind the scenes. I mean, for those that do watch the ESPN broadcast but don't actually watch any of the live streams or have actually played live poker in the main event, you only really get snippets of what is going on in the actions. And ESPN tends to cherry pick the moments. And sometimes they're not even, in my opinion, the most interesting moments from a poker's perspective. As you could tell by the 2016 broadcast, it's about the entertainment, the characters that they mainly focus on. So I'll be happy to share any background stories that might have been missed by the broadcast, as well as just anything that I was thinking during the broadcast.
No,
Absolutely.
I'm really glad you say that, because we really were kind of down on this particular main event because of the pacing, the overexposure of really two players, Alex Keating and Will Kassouf. Obviously, you know more about the Kassouf side of that equation than the Keating side. And I really feel like you are one of the shining sort of second level characters in the editing of this main event.
I mean, there was Kassouf, and then I'd almost argue that Keating was secondary, then everyone else was third tier in this until both Keating and Kassouf kind of got the boot, and then it was a whole different story at the final table. But I'm not too surprised that they focused so much on Kassouf. I think he's probably the most controversial character that we've had in the ESPN broadcasting. When I looked throughout the future broadcastings and even past ones, we haven't had someone that is as talkative and as polarizing within the poker community. So I know that ESPN numbers definitely went up. People that didn't normally watch the broadcast definitely tuned in to see what the hell was going on, and it was definitely one hell of experience to experience in person, because I was across from him on day 7, and then I was also to his immediate left when he got knocked down that very infamous hand, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so how familiar are you with the ESPN coverage? When was the last time you saw 2016? How do you feel it sort of compares in the editing style and other things to previous years?
So I've been a poker fanboy since 2005, during the poker boom. So for me personally, it was even just a surreal experience to even be featured on this. When I learned that I was going to be on the feature table on day 5, I could have not painted a more dream scenario of my first World Series experience. Not only am I going to be on the feature table, but I'm one of the reasons that I'm going to be on these feature tables. I'm just soaking in every moment that I can. In terms of the broadcasting, I think that there was an era between when they first started in 2003 up until about 2010, 2011, where they were mainly focused on the stories. And I think that Maury and the team did a great job on just developing the characters, being able to follow storylines. They somewhat still held true to that between 2012 and I'd say 2016, 2017. And I believe 2019 was the first year where they just didn't do actual edited footage. And it shifted more towards live stream. And that's just been the nature of the audience and just who's been willing to watch poker nowadays, but it was definitely it was a pretty prime era between, let's say, 2003 to 2000. I realistically think mine was one of the last years where you had like editing or like premium editing and being able to follow the storylines of the players.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. No, we've covered each main event up until 2016 on this podcast, and we've documented each change year to year. And because 2016 was the last year, the November 9, it really kind of threw a wrench in the ESPN formula of how they covered the main event the next year, because the next year, 2017, was when they did the whole live feed on ESPN all day long, each day of the tournaments, and then that gradually evolved. And we haven't quite gotten there yet, but I can comment, I'm definitely more of a fan of this sort of this pre-2017 era of the broadcast, just because I like the stories, I like the pacing. You know, you don't have to have this sort of live, a lot of dull hands in some of these later years in the main event. But you know, obviously we'll get there in the podcast. I am curious when, after, you know, months later, they're making these episodes, they're airing on ESPN. Are you watching these, or is the loss in the main event still a little bit too raw? Did you wait a little bit to watch them? What was your experience?
I am definitely the wrong guy to ask to in terms of, like, how would you feel about losing? Because I'm probably the happiest 15th place finisher that they've ever had on this broadcast. I was ecstatic to finish 15th. I actually thought that, like, I only learned, like, after I was knocked out that I got 15th. I didn't even know Jared had been knocked out, so I only learned afterwards that I got the 90K pay bump. But when I'm at home, I'm watching all the episodes, I'm seeing what they're including, was featured, and then I learned very quickly that, unsurprisingly, that's very Kassouf based. And not only am I seeing like how I'm included in this, I'm curious like about everyone else those featured, because like I'm able to see the entire room, who's in the field and who's not. There was some, so I was not surprised to see Will heavily featured. A little bit disappointed to see guys like Tom Marchese, Jared Blesnick, and other guys that are prominent figures within the poker community, like not really get that much exposure, especially Tom Marchese. I feel like he was probably the most underrepresented in the broadcast.
Yeah, I think maybe it was in like two hands the whole time, I think, including his bust out hand. So I fully agree with you there. So, and it's funny, you know, you finished in 15th place, and actually, if you check the chip counts at the start of day 7, you were 15th in chips. So it's kind of a funny little element of how that night would unfold.
Yeah, I mean, some people start short stacks and then work their way up. You see Kui Win and Gordon Vail, and then others, they're just destined for the day that they started with.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, prior to this main event, what was the chain of events that led you to decide to enter into the main event? I know you played in a couple smaller events beforehand, but how did that sort of play out?
So 2015 was actually the first year that I had started to play professionally, and I'm primarily an online cash game player. So tournaments are definitely not my forte. But the main event it's a very special event that actually I'd say really caters to cash game professionals. And when I've talked to my friends like a couple of years prior to me playing, they had played a couple of times and they said, you got to play the main event. Like when you're able to afford it, you got to jump in. And I had a good enough year in 2015 playing mid-stakes cash that I just had 1 month where I ran absurdly hot and told myself this month, because of it, I'm going to be playing the main event next year. And playing a bunch of side events, but the main event nowadays is the only tournament that I will play. All other poker is going to be dedicated towards cash games.
And before, you had played in some tournaments. I saw in Hendon Mob that you cashed in 2012. How were those experiences for you?
Those were fun. Those were like smaller events, like the World Series would stop by in British Columbia, and there'd be small tournaments running. I would hop in. It was definitely a lot of fun just to hop into live tournaments and kind of get my feet wet. As opposed to just being on my computer all day. It was a much different time when I was still kind of like working my way in to the poker scene, because I was still like playing while I was going to university. So I was still very much like trying to take things seriously and figure stuff out. You would have not seen me as like loosey-goosey back having a good time in 2012, 2013, because when you're still trying to learn stuff, like you're anxious, you're trying to do stuff right, you're trying to take stuff really try hard and serious. So fortunately, I'd say like those years combined with my cash game experience just allow me to like really let loose during this main event.
And did your playing style sort of change over time? How was that learning curve for you?
So my learning curve mostly revolves around a lot of coaching. I'd say that the number of original ideas I've actually come up with the poker when it comes to playing poker are few and far between. I'm just really good at watching players that are better than me, learning why they do stuff, and then implementing it as my own. So I've had several coaches over the last decade. God, it's like weird to think that it's been a decade now. But I had coaching from one main guy who I still get coaching from today, and I kind of owe a lot of my skill set and success to him, and a lot of that was applied during this main event.
Did you find yourself being at all starstruck by the players around you as you got deeper and deeper in that main event? Do you feel like anybody that you were a big fan of or had a lot of respect for?
I definitely felt it for the first few times that I was in the Rio. So I didn't only play the main event that year. I actually played like a bunch of smaller events in the background, and that's when I actually got to like meet guys. Like I remember I met Michael Mizrachi during one of these events. I actually ran into Keating during one of the side events, even though I didn't somehow encounter him during the main. And then you run to guys into the hallways that I'd seen on TV for years. I definitely had that whole, like, they're just there. They're not just on TV. So by the time the main event actually rolled around, I kind of already gone through that process where, yeah, I had starstruckness, but it was no longer a surprise. It was no longer a jolt to the system to see someone that had been on TV for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And what was your first response to Keating? How did you meet him, and what was his playing style like?
I can't comment too much on his playing style, other than I know he had a lot more tournament experience than me. And he definitely had a bit of he was doing some unorthodox stuff where I couldn't really comment if it was like good or bad, because frankly, I know there's a bunch of stuff I was doing where now I'd look back and say it was bad. But in terms of his overall demeanor at the table, it was no different than what you saw in the main. And I don't think like his persona, I think, is much different from Kassouf's. I think King's is like completely genuine. He's just trying to have a good time, be himself. I do not believe he does it for any strategic purposes. He's just trying to have fun. Like, I think he has the disposition that if he shows up in a tournament, he just wants to enjoy himself. Like, and sometimes, it can get under people's skin, but quite frankly, that's for them to deal with. I personally enjoyed his time, and I did not think he was being overbearing or overwhelming at the table.
Okay. That's a fair point. So again, let's fast forward to the start of the main event that year. I actually, made some notes of your chip count at the end of each day of that tournament, and it seems like you had a very smooth progression. Your chip stack went up dramatically each day. Was there what was the overall narrative of your main event in those early days of the tournament?
So day one and day two were pretty much exactly that. It was just like steady chipping up. Day three was the day where we made the money by the end of the day, and that was the first day where I actually got all in and started like doubling and started feeling like the real variance of the tournament, but definitely in a positive way. And then day four, it was actually like fairly similar. All days started with chipping up like steadily, but then losing a bunch like towards the end of the day. That was like the first 4 days in a nutshell. Then day five was just like absolutely crazy. Like that first level in the first day is probably the hottest that I've ever run in poker, because I started with below average, and then before you know it, I'm chip leader in the main event, all hell is breaking loose. And then the rhythm just kind of goes off the rails from there. I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm chip leader on day six. Like I know I'm one of the short stacks, and then you saw it all transpire on day seven.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, what were you sort of feeling when you were going on that chip run, where you're saying to yourself, like, oh my God, I'm going to win this thing, or I have to keep myself together or find spots?
So I'd say there were like two main chunks of the main event for me. There's that first day, 4-day period where it's just a steady grind and seeing how the event goes. Because like I'm well aware that all it takes is a short run of bad cards and you're just out, because I'm seeing it happen to players around me. I'm going, okay, like it can happen to anyone, but I'm trusting my own game. So just make the best decisions. If I get knocked out, it's fine. I mean, once I actually cashed, I was already ecstatic to just be in the money and actually cash in my first main event. So I'm just like praying that good decisions, good cards will continue to come my way. Then once day five rolls around, it just becomes like so surreal. Like when you know that you're the one person in the room that can't be knocked out, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm almost guaranteed to make the end of the day, and I'll probably make it tomorrow. And there's some serious money on the line. There was no real fear of getting knocked out. I think the biggest regret, or like fear I had was just making a decision that I would look back on and just regret it. Like regret, like almost like fear coming into my decision making, as opposed to just doing something that I know is right, like logically. Because with that much money on the line, it's so easy for the pressure of the main event to get to you and cause you to make different decisions than you otherwise would in normal situations. So like I feel like a lot of players get a lot of crap for some tight decisions or poor decisions that they make in the main event, not really understanding just how much that pressure is there, because most people only get this chance once in the main event and nobody wants to blow it. So there's all these emotions that you're trying to keep in control. Yeah, I know. I'm one of the lucky sons of bitches that did it twice.
That's fantastic. So really, it's around day 5 in the ESPN broadcast that we really get to see you do your thing on that sort of secondary feature table. You know, I call it table 2 or table B because they didn't really have which of those 2 extra ones were really 2 and 3 clearly. And it, you know, your play style, for the most part, we see you play pretty premium cards, a lot of Broadway cards, King Jack, you know. A lot of strong hands. Were you mixing up a lot more, or is it just more kind of the edit of what hands they did actually show?
I mean, for the most part, I'm just playing good cards. When you're playing 9-handed, you're kind of handcuffed in terms of how like creative you can get, and also just with my particular style, like it is like it's a tighter, like solid, like a bit more theory oriented pre-flop game, and then post-flop, like the tournament can sometimes handcuff like your ability to like really maneuver your chip stack, especially if you're short stacked, so it doesn't really get to showcase creativity. But when I did have like the chip lead, it definitely gave me like the wiggle room, not just for like pre-flop opens, but mostly just being able to be very comfortable post-flop and do whatever I want. Because I'm so used to playing, you know, 100 big blinds, 200 big blinds deep in cash games and you almost never get that in a tournament. That might have been the one time I've ever been able to play that game in a tournament.
Were you ever sort of tempted to play big stack bully or change your game at all?
No, not really. That's just so against my style, and I've also seen plenty of people accumulate chips and completely blow it. So you can definitely like leverage your chip stack for sure. There were spots that I was choosing and applying pressures on like shorter stacks, like putting them all in. Not necessarily like going completely crazy, but just like having good bluffing candidates. And no longer having the fear of pulling the trigger because like I can't get knocked out of the tournament and they can. So that's probably like the one additional thing that you gain by having a ton of chips. It's just being able to be more liberal with pulling the trigger and putting in a lot of chips, as opposed to being one of the short stacks and being terrified of putting in a lot of chips because it will be all your chips.
That's great. And so again, you're the chip leader for a good chunk of day 5. You know, you maintain about, you know, most of those chips as day 5 ends, and then on day 6 maybe you're a bit more in the middle of the pack. And for the most part, we don't see a ton of you in the day 6 episodes of this main event. For the most part, we kind of see day 5 and day 7. Was anything happening off screen on day 6 that was really, you know, dramatic or crazy, or was it just more kind of, you know, grinding it out?
So most of the significant hands that I played were probably featured during the broadcast. Like in the background, they probably caught like most of the interesting hands at our outer table, and then when we were moved to the secondary table, same thing with some key exceptions to some hands. But I think I'm not surprised that I believe Dan Coleman was also featured on day 6, and that's also when Keating was still kept in. There was a big hand, if we're talking like towards the later hand of the day, there's one hand where Gordon wins ace-king to aces in order to stay alive in the tournament. The sequence of hands that happened like just prior to that got completely edited out, because like 3 hands prior, like I got in kings against ace-king, it was like a 12 million chip pot. So if I lose this pot, I'm down to like 3 million. And it runs out ace-jack-jack and then turn queen river 10 in order to chop. And I was just losing my mind because I thought I was going to lose this huge-ass pot, but I managed to stay alive for a 4-outer. Then the very next hand, short stack gets in with king-jack against Michael Ruan's queens. Flop comes king, low card, but then turn queen, and then the short stack's out. And then it's literally this ace-king to aces the very next hand. So we have like this 4-hand span like coming back from dinner break, where the table just going like crazy. I'm like, this is day 6 of the main event. What the hell is going on?
Wow, that's crazy.
Day 6 is when it gets nutty. Oh man, that's crazy. So just kind of moving the timeline along here. So the end of day 6, you have about 10.6 million chips. That puts you in that sort of middle third of the field. And they announce the table draws before the next day's action begins, and you see who's at your table for that day. And we always talk about in the podcast how important that first table draw is on day 7, because just what can happen is so reliant on who you're with that first half of that day. What was your philosophy? What was your plan going into day 7 with your chip stack as it was?
So, to give proper context, I should talk about just table dynamic, at the end of day 6. That is probably one of the toughest tables I have ever played at. So when I actually got out of that table with 11 million chips, I looked at my table draw. Almost any table draw was going to be easier than the one I'd had the prior days. So I was very, very happy, especially when I saw, Kassouf 2 to my right. I actually didn't know much about Kassouf at the time, nor I had heard much of the controversy going on, other than some murmurings I had heard from Gordon about him. But when I was looking at the table draw and then checking out, how much tournament winnings everyone had, there was, some experienced guys, like Gordon's obviously very experienced in the online world. Cliff Joseph is obviously very renowned within the poker community. But there was a lot less long-term in spreadsheets on this table. So going in, I know I'm one of the mid to short stacks at the table, and I know that I could just show up, play first hand, be knocked out. I was fully prepared for that. So there wasn't so much a strategy coming in. If anything, it was more the mentality of knowing, okay, we come to day 7. If we last another 9 players, we can make a money jump, potentially. But there's a good shot you're just out in a half hour. So just enjoy every minute that you can.
Yeah, so up till that point in the tournament, who did you see as being the most skilled players, and were there any players that had surprised you with their play?
Marchese was definitely top dog at that time. Looking around the field, he was probably the guy that I had pegged as the favorite at that point. Cliff Joseph would have been another one. Those that aren't involved in the online community wouldn't know that he is involved in a lot of staking deals in the World Series. He actually staked Joe Cata back in 2009 and had a very big piece of that. Yeah, Johnny Backs, and he ran a stable called Backs and Cheats. So world of experience, and had a massive stack. So his experience and just chip position definitely made him the favorite as well. In terms of surprise, it's hard to really say when you're really surprised by a player, because other than looking at the tournament spreadsheets, you don't really know too much about the players that you're playing until you really talk with them. So the first impressions that you get, it's I'm never really surprised by a player when they do almost anything at that point. I think the only thing that was surprised is I didn't know Johnny Backs was Johnny Backs until a friend informed me that old dude is Johnny Backs. I thought he was just some old dude that had a crap ton of chips. I'm like, ooh, baby, give me the chips. And then, no, it's a crusher.
That's great.
Yeah. So as day 7 unfolds, it seems like from the edit, because they gave a lot of time to just the final 3 tables played on the 2 tables, that for the first level or so, Kassouf was pretty quiet. He was low in chips, so he wasn't didn't have talking chips yet. Was he up to his usual antics in the early goings of day 7, or did that more kind of kick in a little bit later?
It definitely kicked in later. Early goings, I'd say for the first hour or 2 before he actually started to win some pots, he was quite quiet at the table and not really interfering with anything. And I think just because he wasn't getting involved in pots, the edit didn't really miss out anything in terms of his banter, because he would only start the bantering when he was actually in hands, which was a big problem during the actual play. If he was just being talkative and social outside of hands, wanting to get to know the table, that would have been one issue, and I don't think it would have been controversial. It's the fact that he was doing it almost always when he was in hands, and then taking a pretty absurd amount of time while doing so, that got all the players quite riled.
Yeah, I get the vibe from a lot of the interviews that the talk by Kassouf wasn't the problem. It was more the time he was taking. If anything, if someone else talks, that is, could be information for you to at least sort of get any sort of grasp on his hand or something like that sometimes. Or that Matt Moss, for example, said that, Kassouf's quite good at what he does, but he just takes too long. And that kind of echoes that same mentality. So, Kassouf begins day 7 with about 6 million chips, and just kind of in one level, it seems like that, that 140K, 240K level goes from 6 million up to 30 million. Just kind of a little bit at a time. Never was all in, it looked like. He just kind of wins a couple million each time. what was the energy like at that table while this was all going on?
So there was definitely a dynamic switch once he started like winning a bunch of pots. Both because like he was getting involved in most of the hands, and it was no coincidence that once he got involved in most of the hands, that play started slowing down. Like I'm glad you mentioned that second level, because I know someone like tracked just how many hands we were playing in conjunction with the other tables. I think the other two tables got in around like 40 hands apiece, and then during that level when Kassouf was in all the pots, it was 26 hands that we got in during that 2-hour level. So it wasn't just our imagination that Kassouf was like stalling the clock on us and allowing us to play like less hands. Like we had someone tracking it and saying, yeah, he's like slowing down the clock. And that's why we were all getting like pretty frustrated that he was eating up so much time for us, because we're really not getting to play. It's unfair to like everyone else in the tournament. So if he hadn't really chipped up, I think it would have been a lot different, because you could definitely he definitely has his own emotional tilt issues. You could tell when he was like when he was losing, he had a different demeanor, and when he was winning, he had his usual demeanor. You got to see the more talkative demeanor, because like when you're running deep in the tournament, you're mostly just winning. So he was in a good mood and wanted to get under people's skin.
Yeah, so do you feel like during this phase of this day, would you feel like you were card dead at all? What was your, do you feel, like, we don't see you in a ton of hands. He's in a couple hands against Josephine, against Kassouf here and there, but for the most part, it's often Blesnik or Matt Moss kind of in the crosshairs of Kassouf. What was going on with you during this first part of the day 7?
So for the most part, I was just hovering. I won a couple of hands early on, which you did get to see in the broadcast. And then I'm like just pretty much card dead for the next like 4 to 6 hours, like winning some small pots here and there to somewhat stay afloat, but they didn't really nix any significant hands that I played in the broadcast during day 7. I was very happy to keep staying afloat and just keep playing my game, but you do need to make a bunch of hands in order to actually chip up. And if you're not making hands, then like the best that you can do is just make sure that you don't get knocked out. So yeah, I was mostly just staying afloat during this time when Kassouf was just skyrocketing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And are you sort of getting frustrated? Like what's sort of going through your mind while all this is going on and Kassouf is also doing his antics?
So like initially when he started his antics, I was actually pretty entertained, because it's the first time that I'm really exposed to all this. And it's similar to my first encounters with Keating. When I do think that being talking at the table is good. I think that there should be more socializing and just more of an effort for there not to be 9 guys with sunglasses and hoodies like playing at the poker table. It's just not a fun experience. Hence why like I try to chat my neighbors and not be just a total stonewall when I'm playing. But once he started saying, like, he would say the same lines over and over, and he would like be doing his chatter and and always doing it when he was playing. And then more specifically, like you could tell he could enjoy trolling. Like he enjoyed like getting under people's skin. And when it was clear that that's what his motive was, and not necessarily just trying to be friendly, it was more like pretending to be friendly, but really just trying to troll everyone. That's when like everyone, including myself, started to have problems. And that's when we just started being like pretty relentless with calling the clock on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely sense the sort of mob mentality against Kassouf really kind of kicks in. The whole table starts to, say lines like, you have the IQ of a parrot, you're a clown. For the most part, you kind of stay out of that part of the chatter at the table. I mean, you show your disgust. They do a lot of edits panning around the table. Everyone's kind of like shaking their heads or rolling their eyes. But for the most part, I feel like Josephine and Veo and Matt Moss and I guess Blesnik are kind of the main quartet there, kind of getting their words in there. Were you okay with them saying that? Like, did you feel like 2 wrongs don't make a right? What was your sort of
so like it's what everyone else at the table, like Cliff, Blesnik, etc., had to say were not things that I would echo. It's just not how I would talk to anyone, despite how annoying they would be. I can't say I was necessarily like disagreeing with the animosity. I was just handling it differently. Like if I were to like put myself in the shoes of like everyone else, I would just try and like keep a calm head, because I just don't personally gain anything from saying anything like really nasty to anyone else. If anything, it makes me a person that I don't want to be. But I was not surprised in the slightest that he was getting the comments that he was. Like, he's getting under people's skin. There's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot of pressure there. So emotions are definitely going to be at play. And I think you saw a lot of that. Like what you just named half the table.
Mhm.
Do you feel that the tournament officials did the right thing with Kassouf? Would you have given Kassouf a penalty? How would you have handled that?
The tournament officials did the best that they could within the rules that they had. They had not really had to deal with someone like Kassouf that was taking 2 minutes on on a decision when there wasn't even a bet on a table. I know that they rewrote the rules afterwards to deal with Kassouf. The very next year, you just have a clock called on you if you were just taking excessive time, even after 10 seconds. But because of the current rules, their hands were kind of tied for like really reducing his time and really helping us out. So he was just allowed to like take 2 minutes in order to make a bet. Unfortunately for us. And in terms of the penalties that I would have imposed, I'm really not sure, like, in the moment, what I would have done. I would have wanted to be able to just, like, reduce his clock, like, a lot faster, for sure. But with tournament rules, you really have to play by the book because there's just some slippery slopes that you go down if you're a tournament official and you make a ruling that is, like bordering on not following what is in the book. There has to be something in writing in order for them to follow it. So would I have done something differently, like, without a rule book? Absolutely. But would I have been able to do something differently within the rule book? Really unsure. There's some bureaucracy that you have to plow through.
And do you feel that they've changed the rules enough to deal with a player like Kassouf? Like, is there any other rules that you think that they should add?
No, I don't think so. Like the one rule change they made of just being able to reduce the clock on a what's the word I'm looking for? Like if a player's taking too much time, they can just like automatically reduce your clock without just on personal judgment. That alone already would have solved our problems. Like if Kassouf only had 10 seconds to act pre-flop and like 30 seconds to make a bet on a decision, we all would have been okay. And I think everything would have gone away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the infamous Matt Moss all-in with ace-8 against Kassouf's 2-3s hand, where that's where the drama really kind of kicks in. But while Kassouf is talking to Matt Moss, after Moss shoves, the director chimes in 1 player per hand. I felt that was an incorrect usage of that rule because it was Kassouf's turn to act and he was not, breaking that rule. What's your thoughts on that one?
I think that it goes back to what I said about them trying to like go with the book, but their hands being kind of tied because there is a rule in WSOP terms and conditions of like 1 player per hand. And I think they were just really scrambling to like look for any rule that would actually be able to like keep him from doing his stall antics. But and that was just the best they could come up with at the time. Do I agree with it? Absolutely not. I have the same feelings as you when I'm watching the footage. This really doesn't hold up as much as I want Kassouf to see ramifications for his actions. Like this is just not appropriate for the situation. And even when Jack was coming over and like talking to the table and clarifying what was going on, like we lost 5 minutes at that table while that was all going on. Like, and I think that's unfair to us when all of us want to play hands. There's time being used in order to resolve this conflict. Meanwhile, everyone else is just getting to play at a different pace than us.
Mm-hmm. So there was a sit down between Jack Effel and Will Kassouf that was shown in one of the episodes. And then after that, Kassouf his table presence definitely changed. He's a little bit quieter. His little chip putting in the middle kind of gets a bit more aggressive in how he puts it in.
Mm-hmm.
He plays a couple of hands against you that he actually does get to win with. And then the tables do consolidate from 3 down to 2 when there's 18 players left. And you have the fortune of still being with Kassouf at that table. But during this whole part, you have one of those classic all-ins where you put all but 1 chip in the middle and then the last chip in. Was that just kind of a little fun thing for you to do in the moment? Because obviously you're not going to fold the last chip.
No, I'm not folding it, but this is something that you'll see commonly in tournaments and it's an unfortunate part of the game, but when there's so much money up for grabs, like no one holds it against someone for holding the 1 chip to be able to tank so that somebody could be knocked out of the tournament. I had already seen Gordon do this. I hadn't even thought about doing it, but when Gordon was doing this on the short stack, and I thought, you know what? There's a lot of money on the line. I can't come up with a good reason not to do this, so I was going to stall. But I got the blessing of Kassouf doing all the stalling for me, so that by the time the money jump actually came in, I didn't have to do any stalling. So Kassouf kind of saved my ass from doing like a 5-minute tank. Because like if I'm being honest, I would have. That was the entire reason of holding on to that 1 chip.
I mean, how good did it feel to see that ace on that flop when you're all in with ace queen against, some mystery Kassouf fan? It had to feel pretty good to hit that ace.
Oh, it was good knowing that I was getting past the dinner break. I'm not sure which felt better, doubling up against him, or like when I'm in mid hand, I hear the announcement that a player has been knocked down, and I finally made money for the day.
Yeah, I remember you do mention that in the edit. They say I finally made money today, so that was had been good. And then once you get down to two tables, you have doubled up prior to the tables consolidating, so you're still on the short side, but you find yourself witness to one of the most viral, explosive hands in main event history. Tell us, as a spectator at the table, what was going through your mind while this whole hand was happening.
I was very emotionally tilted at this point. Unfortunately, since I was a short stack, I had a lot of room just to be emotionally tilted because my decisions were quite simple. But Kassouf had gone back to his talkative antics by this point. I should mention that the level before dinner break, when you saw Kassouf all quiet, we had suspected that he had gone to talking from the floor because everyone did notice that he was being quiet. And even towards the end, what the edit doesn't show, like Joseph being the other guy just saying, like, commending Will for actually being good. Like, we didn't mind that the pace that he was going, even though he was still like going pretty slow. The lack of talk actually did make a difference for the table dynamic. But when that hand came up, the hand itself went down a lot louder and a lot more intense than what I think the edit really picks up. One of the reporters that was like not even in the room, but he was like 100 feet in the hallway doing reporting, you could still hear Griffin just reaming at Will while this was going on. And then when the hand is going down and the river card actually rolls off, you hear like Griffin going nuts. You kind of hear the crowd in the background. The crowd was more like your home team just scored the overtime goal and is celebrating. Everyone wanted Will out for the banter that was going on, myself included. Like, they muted myself down. I am impressed that they managed to get my voice out because I was just going completely nuts. Because I was, in my mind, Griffin, I had also like played with a lot on day 6, on day 5, was also a generally like social and good guy. And he was someone that was rooting for in the event. So we had, in my mind, like good guy with aces, bad guy with kings that's about to knock out the villain. Like, you couldn't have scripted it better.
No, it's it was a crazy hand watching that for the first time in ESPN 6 years ago, and I think top 5 hand in main event history of all time in many ways, because very very rarely does one hand embody the entire narrative, the entire main event up until that point, and then it reaches its climax with an explosive aces versus kings confrontation. So, Kassouf bust. There's now 16 players left. You're still a short stack, but is there any sort of stress or pressure off your shoulders now that he's out of the tournament?
Not so much pressure, but there was always a knowledge once we got down to 2 tables and I still doubled that I'm still in jam or fold mode, or there's not really much that I can do with my stack other than just stick it in and hope that my hand holds up. So I'm still very aware that, okay, Kassouf's out. There's one more guy to go for the next pay jump. But that like literally any hand can be my last. So I'm not so much stressed about it. I'm more just prepared for it and just like taking it one hand at a time, going, okay, we can still enjoy our time at the table, fold here, okay, and now we have to send it, etc.
So that last hand, what was sort of going through your mind there?
That one, I know that a lot of people will watch and think that I just punted it because it looks like a pretty light get-in. And that hand, like, I still think that one is very, very close. There's 2 things that are going on that I think are in my favor, and one that's like extremely against my favor, and I would definitely fold that hand now. The one thing that makes it a fold now is I didn't know Blesnik was knocked out at the tournament. I still thought we were on a money jump. That alone would make that hand a fold, because just holding on to my chips and making the money jump, like, that's the number 1 priority. But the 2 things going in my favor, one, Gordon had already demonstrated his ability to have 3-bet bluffs in that spot. I believe it was pawns open the cutoff, and Gordon 3-bet the button. He had already 3-bet like a near identical spot when he was short stack. So for sure, when he has chips, he definitely has a bunch of 3-bet bluffs, like ace-5 suited, ace-3 suited, king jack offsuit, etc. And with how short I am, like, Gordon's just going to be priced into call with like all of his bluffs. So ace jack is going to be doing, I would have folded ace jack offsuit, but ace jack suited is doing like not all that bad, like against the better hands, and it is going to be dominating a lot of his bluffs. And then the second thing is that because of my cash game background, I am just not all that attuned to playing short stack. So I know that like my best edge for just trying to win the tournament and trying to advance is just trying to pick a spot to get all in to double up, so I just have more chips in front of me to maneuver with, because you don't have the much wiggle room with 18 blinds, 20 blinds, whatever I had at the time. More experienced tournament pros would be able to maneuver that stack and be able to continue to hover. I just did not have the skill set at the time, so it was in my interest to gamble a bit more in my position than for some other more experienced tournament pros.
I mean, one of the best parts about seeing you on TV is just your personality, your energy, your exuberance. The table multiple times praises your presence at the featured table. Josephine, for example, praises your sort of attitude, and I think that is best encapsulated in your energy during the run out of that actual all in. You know, you're hopping on the table, you're pumped up. You know, the run out, you know, gives you some more outs, and you're, you know, massaging the dealer's shoulders, and you're happy. You know, either way. Was that just a way for you to sort of make light of a very stressful run out?
Partly that. I feel like I have just a very different approach when it comes to the main event than most players, especially when you get deep. Everyone's just terrified to get knocked out. It's like, get this far. It's like, if I just make it another, you know, 2 or 3 players, I make, you know, this amount of money. My attitude, like right from day one, was everyone but one person is going to get knocked out of this tournament. Like at some point, everyone has to deal with that adrenaline dump of getting knocked out. So I already know, like, unless I'm a Queen, unless I'm like one of the main event champs, and I'm not going to count that, I am going to get knocked out. I've already accepted that. So like when I'm actually all in and I'm potentially going to be knocked out, like why not try and make the best of it? Because like this was going to happen at some point, whether I like it or not. And another part is just like dealing with the nerves, dealing with anxiety. It's a way of me trying to process everything that's going on, so that the pressure doesn't really get to me. So yeah, combination of nerves and just trying to have a good time.
Mm-hmm. So after you bust, obviously you shake everyone's hand and go. What sort of happens afterward? Was there a celebration of your performance? Did you want to go back to your hotel? What were you sort of thinking?
So I had a room at the Rio. I crashed for a little bit because at this point I am exhausted. I've been running on 5 hours of sleep for like the last 3 days. And just primarily running on adrenaline. Those that don't run deep in the main event, it's hard to describe just like how fatigued and how taxing it is to run deep in that event, because they're like pretty rigid with when you need to show up and when you go to bed. You're showing up at noon. You're not done with the tournament until like 1 or 2 a.m., especially for the later days. And with so much money on the line, it is tough to get a good night's sleep. The night after day 6, I remember trying to get to bed. I got to bed at like 3 a.m. and I just woke up at 5 a.m. in just like this cold sweat, and I could feel like this physical sensation in my body that's really hard to describe, but basically just imagine all like your nervous energy channeled in a physical reaction. Like mentally I was okay, but my body was having a physical reaction to like how like big a spot this was to the situation I found myself in. So once I had actually busted, I just wanted to rest. I just wanted to sleep. The celebration came back later once we actually flew home and went to Vancouver. I did have enough energy to go back down and actually see like the final table bubble, the November 9 being announced. Congratulate the guys that I got to know, like Griffin, Gordon, etc. And that's also like why I was there during the final table.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's funny, on the other table, table 2, Kui Win was a wrecking ball. He was busting 3 players within the next hour after you busted. Mm-hmm. So, you know, in an ideal situation, maybe you fold the ace-jack, maybe you double up. You might get 12th place in that main event if Kui Win does that, you know? And it's not.
Don't tell me that! Don't tell me that!
Yeah, 12th place, you know? What's wrong with 12th place? Oh,
it could happen, it could happen. You know, the first main event run, you know, if it was a mistake, it's a mistake. I got to embrace.
So, you know, for that final table, were you on anyone's rail in particular? Were you rooting for a couple of folks? Was there anybody you were, you know, fully on board with?
I was on Team Gordon because like he and I had played like a good amount of day 6 and then literally all of day 7. and was the guy that I was rooting for. So prior to actually leaving Vegas before November 9, we swapped contacts, and he just promised me they'd be able to get me a ticket to be able to actually rail. So when I was watching the broadcast, it was in anticipation of flying down for the November 9, and it was a fun experience. I got to watch literally the entire final table during all this. Obviously, I'm also rooting for Griffin. I'm also rooting for Cliff, and all the guys that I played with. But I was the cheering section for Gordon.
Were you at all involved with Gordon's preparations for the November 9?
I was not. Main coaches that I know of, I know Tom Marchese was the main coach for Gordon, and I think Tom also recruited a couple other guys that he was close with. But no, I was primarily just moral support.
Mm-hmm. Now, with every final table, each one has its own narrative, its own story. I felt that this particular final table was very well played, very entertaining, and very unique in, especially towards the ending, how it all played out. So where did you feel the entertainment value of this main event final table holds up compared to years past and years since then?
I'm so biased because I got to know most of these players that were playing. So every single hand that they're involved in, there's a history that I have associated with that. So it becomes much more interesting. I know that when I watch 2017, 2018, 2020, just years that I wasn't involved with, I'm a lot less engaged with the action as opposed to the years that I was involved with. So personally for me, extremely entertaining, especially just from being somewhat associated with most of the guys that are at the final table. But if I'm speaking objectively, I think that if the main driving factor for the entertainment value was Kui Win, because he was such a wild card and managed to last. If it wasn't for him, I think you just would have seen a more standard final table. Everyone's playing solid and not too much interesting going down, mostly the hands going down. But Kui had the spice that I think that everyone was looking for.
Absolutely.
Had you heard at all about Kui's play during the main event?
No, not at all. Somehow Kui Win was one of the only guys that I had not played with during the entire 7-day run. So I only really got to see Kui during the footage when it was all airing, and then in real time when it was actually playing. And it was quite something to see what he was pulling off, especially when we have someone watching the live feed and we hear the whole cards a half hour after.
Yeah. So what was that like? Hearing all these whole cards coming up and you're hearing Kui's plays, then how was that information relayed to Gordon?
I mean, it was I'm not sure how it was relayed to Gordon because communication between him and Tom, there's a lot of people and a lot of noise going on. So unless you were directly beside the conversation, you can't hear anything. But when I'm hearing the hands, I'm just man, Kui's a man. He gives 0 Fs about this. He's in this for the win, and that is very clear. He's not in this for the money jumps. And that definitely gave him an edge at the final table because everyone else was very much concerned about the pay jumps. So it made Kui the favorite to either be 9th or be the eventual winner.
Do you like the choice of the tournament to divide the final table into 3 separate days, or do you prefer 2 days or even 1 day?
That's hard to say because it really depends on how long it takes for players to get knocked out. I think it'd be fine if they just had it as similar days for the previous days of the tournament. So you play 5 levels, you end, and then you just show up the next day. I also think it's totally fine if the player at the player's discretion, if they say we're tired, we want to rest up and then play the next day, to do that. It's complicated though because they have to accommodate for ESPN and their air times. They're locked in for the certain number of hours. So players do not have any control over that. And it definitely takes a toll on the players for playing 3 days straight. But at the same time, your adrenaline is running so high and you're thinking about so much that I can't actually tell just how tired you usually get. So I don't think it's ideal what they have right now, but I also don't know what the ideal thing is.
You've had the distinction of being deep on day 7, both in the November 9 era and the post-November 9 era. From your experiences on those 2 main events, do you think you would have been in favor of having that 3-month break, or would you have rather have had it a couple of days later as they do now?
Personally, I think having no break is definitely more advantageous for the experienced players. Inexperienced players aren't going to have time to really get coaching, and I think that more experienced pros are just going to be able to handle a 2-day break and then restart playing, continue your momentum a lot better than an inexperienced player. Whereas, like, I mean, we saw this with like plenty of other file tables with that 3-month break where players would go off with coaching, and then like you'd be playing against, like, you play against the same guy, but you wouldn't necessarily be playing against the same player anymore. You'd have to relearn just like what their new style is and what they learned from coaching, which is, you know, tough to deal with, like as a pro with that much money on the line and limited hands to be able to actually find out like what's new, what's going on. So if I would much rather just play against the same batch of guys 2 days later than deal with a potential new batch of guys 3 months later.
And what was watching the final table like live? How did it sort of change from day to day?
So the atmosphere was definitely like, it's like nothing I've experienced before, because you have 9 different cheering sections that are going berserk at each different time, even over the smallest stuff. And then the field just like, it shrinks and shrinks just as players get knocked out and becomes more concentrated with fans. And then you have like some crowds that are migrating to a different cheering section. So like the crowd's getting smaller, but specific cheering sections are getting bigger. Like I started like just railing in the back because they didn't have enough space up front for everyone to rail. But by the time the second day rolled around, I was actually just able to be like sideline on the table. It was a lot more fun being sideline on the table than it was just being in the audience, because then you felt like you're actually a part of it instead of just being the spectator in the Penn and Teller Theater.
So I think we have to talk about this heads-up battle, one of the most well-known heads-up battles in main event history, Gordon Vail against Qui Win, really as polar opposite poker style as it really can reasonably get in the main event's history. Did you like Gordon Vail's strategy, or did you think there were some spots maybe you would have, you know, made it the tough call? Did you like Qui Win's style? Do you think adjustments weren't made appropriately?
So I can't comment too much on Qui Win because he was just being a madman. But he was definitely like, I think he probably knew that he was like the lesser skilled player in that match, and probably the lesser skilled player like amongst the field. So just taking spots like higher variance spots and just going for it was definitely to his advantage. I liked how Gordon was playing up until specifically one hand, and I'm sure you know which hand I'm talking about, the Queen 9 fold.
Queen 9 Jack 5,
which was the biggest pot of the tournament. And I actually talked to Gordon about that a couple of years later about what he thought, and he just agreed, yeah, like that should have been a call. Much like I said earlier though about running deep in the main event, like it's hard to emphasize just like what happens to your mind when like there's that much money on the line and it's the pressure in the main event. That is what happened to Gordon in that moment. Gordon said like in almost any other situation, it was just like, it was call 3 streets, like, and it's not even close in his mind. But because of the situation of it being like heads up the main event, he was taking into account some library, which turned out to be incorrect. Was thinking about certain properties of his hand, which also turned out be incorrect, and then ended up making a fold that he definitely regrets. And what was not even shown on the live feed was that Gordon found out about that showdown a half hour later, and like that was the first time I ever saw him frustrated, like in the tournament. And after I saw that, I thought, this match is done. There's not much I can do, because like Gordon just, like any confidence that Gordon had about like his strategy just went out the window. His entire game plan was to be able to have that spawn call down and have Qui be like incredibly out of line, and he didn't capture it, and there probably wasn't going to be an opportunity like that again.
Okay.
Well, to talk about 2 hands that Vail played correctly, which was the set of 8s against Rosicka and then the set of her set situation against Josephie. How do you feel about those hands, and what was it like to watch those hands rooting for Gordon?
So the first one against Brzezinska, I'll first say that Brzezinska was extremely unfortunate to run into the hand that Gordon did. I really liked his play. Like even talking to Gordon on the sidelines, like Gordon was a fan of it. Like Gordon would have a tough time calling with anything but a set in that spot. Even King, Queen, Ace, Queen, like he probably calls, but it's extremely tough with that much money on the line. And Gordon's play is just like extremely standard. There's basically, you have a set, dry board, just call down, person punts chip to you. There's not too much decisions to be made there. The second hand against Josephie, that is one that is fairly controversial. I think on face, it looks like fairly standard, like Gordon's just supposed to double every single time there. With just given the positions and given the action that happened on the flop and specifically on the turn, there's a very strong argument that Cliff can fight the fold there, because Gordon, like I remember like talking to some of the guys on the rail when Gordon goes all in, and I turned to Like I said to one of Gordon's friends that doesn't play much poker, don't worry, Gordon always has a set here. Like he doesn't have any other hand but a set. So like I believe it was king 4-3 and then turn deuce.
King 2-3 and then turn
king 2-3. Yeah. So like in that spot, like I think that like Cliff just has a snap call with threes because he beats deuces, but for the same reason, full deuces because he can't beat threes. Like Gordon calls the small blind, over calls the 3-bet, over calls a c-bet after Kui win bets, and then Cliff calls. Gordon's just not playing king queen, ace queen, ace king, or any other hand like this. It's always going to be a pocket pair, and it's going to be a pocket pair that like hit the board. Gordon's hands are like kind of tied because like the hands they can have once he gets to the turn are somewhat face up, so there's not too much he can do differently. He's just going to look strong no matter what. There's a strong argument that Cliff could have played the hand differently.
Yeah, I know that Phil Hellmuth and a couple of guys during the break on the live ESPN broadcast agreed with that same mentality there, and I personally agree too. I'm not a poker pro, but I think you have to fold it and fight on another day there. Let's see. I think that, I mean, any more questions yet, Sam, about this main event? Because there's a couple more we can really discuss here too.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of after Heads Up ends, was there any sort of, did you go and see Kui Win celebrate? What was sort of the reaction with Gordon? Anything happen afterward?
Gordon was extremely gutted, but I think that was a process that happened. Like that was a whole process that was transpiring after the Queen 9 hand. Basically, you know, there was some hope injected. You know, he gets a double, but we kind of knew that the inevitable was coming. Like I spoke to Gordon briefly about it, said my goodbyes, but there wasn't really a celebrating despite him making over $1 million pay jump that day. He just wanted to go home and rest, and I'm really not sure what he did. Like shortly after the run end. What Kui did, I have no idea. I'd imagine he was celebrating. Like, how can you not after you win the main event? But all I really got to see was the celebration on stage and then the entire crowd just like leaving out of the Pentone Theater.
Yeah, so, you know, again, it was a very entertaining in certain ways main event. I obviously have some of the issues with the first half of the main event, the pacing and stuff. But it was, you know, it's a great story to reflect on. But your story in the main event would not end there. You know, 2017 rolls around. This is the year after you've been, you know, a prominent figure in the previous year's broadcast. Did that change your sort of table image, your poker celebrity when you're back playing poker the next year?
It definitely got me a lot more exposure. It made me a lot more comfortable just sitting down the table, and like it makes it an easy icebreaker when you're one of the dudes that runs deep in the main event, and then you sit in the main event, you're just one of the guys that can be recognized. It hasn't really changed like any play. Like if anything, it makes it easier to get paid off because you're just seen as like being capable. So like if you're running deep, you must be like making some plays. Like how can you not? But it's made the main event just like a complete joy to play. Is like very first year, like when it's my first year and I don't know anyone, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't screw up. Like there was a bit of try hard mode going on, like trying to focus on the decisions. And like since I got that exposure, like any future main events I have played, it's been a lot easier just to sit down and like focus on the play, but also just make sure I'm having a good time from day one.
At this point, you just won $400,000 from that finish in the main event. Did that affect your approach to the 2017 World of Poker? Did you play more events? Did you play the same number of events? Did you at all change your approach to that, you know, those tournaments?
For a tournament specifically, no. I played a WPT event in Montreal later that year in 2016. But after that, I just decided that I was only going to be playing the main event. The smaller events tend to bring out, especially on day one, just a bit more of the tryhards, and there's a lot less socializing. The main event is really a unique animal where like you're paying like a lot more money to go in, but since you have like so many qualifiers and people that are just trying to play this one tournament because it's the main event, gotta play. It's a lot, and you're really not expected to be knocked out day one. There's a bit more of a relaxed and less tense atmosphere for the first few days that I really enjoy. So, if I did not have that positive social experience, I just wouldn't be playing live poker at all. So, like that needs to be there for me to be playing tournaments.
I mean, your track record in the main event it makes me think you kind of have it figured out to a certain degree. You've cashed in the main event 3 times. 2017, you didn't cash in the main event. So what happened there?
I just played terribly. No, like I think 2017 was just a standard run. Just didn't make too many hands. I think there was one hand that I played that I really regretted, but other than that, didn't get the cards. Got the run of cards that you'd expect for someone busting on day 2. If anything, the fact that I got a second run is absurd. When I made that later deep run, each day that I progressed, and especially when I made day 7 again, I'm like, this is stupid. Because you can count on the number of one hand, like in the last 5-10 years, how many people have gone to do this twice. I feel extremely blessed to have gone that experience twice.
Mm-hmm. So to 2018, you made kind of a min cash sort of. The main event year over year is actually growing in size. So you're dealing with a slightly bigger field each year. Is the main event is the vibe of each tournament as these years are going by, is it more or less the same, or did you feel there's any change in the field at all?
No, more or less the same. I think that probably the biggest change that they made, not even for that year, but I think it was my year that they started doing 2016 that they started doing this, was allowing more people to make the money. I'm sure you saw in the earlier years it was 10% of people make the money, and they bumped it to 15% of people.
Yes.
And that just allows more people to say I made money in the main event. I think it was a great decision for the recreationals, because just being able to say I cashed in the main event is a big deal for a lot of people. But to answer your question, for 2016, 2018, even 2019, it's all been the same to me. It's a massive field. Everyone's just hoping to win, but a lot of people are just trying to have a good time because it's their one shot of playing the annual event that everyone looks forward to.
And your kind of graduating class of 2016 spawned a lot of repeat deep runs. John Sim, the man who got 11th place, got 15th, won the whole thing in 2018. Antoine Saout has made 3 day 7s. He got 25th or something in your year, and then made the final table. Was there something in the water that day in the casino there that just kind of spawned this amazing poker?
I got no goddamn idea. I should also mention Rouen, who took 4th in my year and then managed to bubble the final table the very next year. That was absurd to watch. But yeah, I remember looking back on those years and then seeing 2017, 2018, going damn, there's some familiar names from previous years. And I expected there was just some bias because I'm recognizing the people that I played with. But it's actually quite shocking how many guys that ran deep during my year end up having second chances or just other deep runs. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe 2016 was just a magical year.
So I know we haven't quite gotten to it in the podcast yet, and I actually know probably the least about the 2019 main event of all the ones that we haven't covered yet in this podcast. What was your journey through that main event compared to 2016? Was it a similar sort of steady climb, or was there more ups and downs, or how did that go?
Very, very different. I'd say steady climb day 1 and 2. I just had a big stack up until day 4. Then it was very, very swinging. I was anywhere from short stack to above average for 3 days. The one thing that I will heavily emphasize is that the second day 7 experience that I had felt like I got a proper day 7 experience and not a Will Kassouf show for 8 hours. My dad flew down both times, and even 2 hours in, we both just agreed that this feels like a proper day 7. This feels like a proper poker experience that we're everyone's just able to enjoy themselves and not just have one guy take over. So it's still kind of stupid that I was able to have that second chance, but I'll take it.
Do you feel that finishing 10th would have been worse than finishing 15th again, or would you think you would have preferred 10th place still?
Huh? I mean, it would have been nearly double money, so I don't think I would have been complaining really. Fair point.
So
that's actually a good. I think that it is more painful for the guys that finish 10th than it usually is for 12th or 15th, because you feel you're so close to the final table. That is definitely a real thing. So I know almost everyone that busts the main event that deep, you don't even think about the money. It's that adrenaline dump that you're dealing with. I no longer get to play. because there's a high that you develop when you're running deep in this tournament. Because like just imagine you're playing some game and you just have not lost for 7 days. Like that accumulates. Like, and that is like it's almost like a drug that you get. And I got to indulge in it twice. Don't get me wrong. But then, like, a lot of guys just do not handle it well when you have no choice but to let it go, because you do not get to choose when you're getting off the high. It just happens all of a sudden. So I am not surprised in the least when people, they've won a bunch of money, but they just feel like gutted inside. And it's not even from the, like, I could have done so much better. It's just like the disappointment that they no longer like get to do this anymore when they've gotten to do it for 7 to 8 days straight.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel that your deep run in 2016 gave you an advantage? I mean, 2019 was a very stacked field with Ensign and Sammartino and all that. But did you feel like you had an advantage over them because you'd made a deep run?
I'm not necessarily advantage over Ensign and Sammartino, but the field was way softer on the 2019 day 7 than 2016. I remember checking, like, you basically named the 2 people that I think were the only guys that had real tournament experience, or at least like tournament spreadsheets. Everyone else, when I was looking them up, just turned out to be first-timers, recreationals, guys with cash games or like small tournament backgrounds. So I felt like extremely comfortable going in, not just from the experience of playing day 7 again, but knowing this is everyone's first time, and for most of them, this is going to be by far the biggest spot. So like I can do almost whatever I want in this field, or I can get away with a lot more stuff that I couldn't get away with in 2016.
It's funny, that day 7 is also home to one of the more prominent day 7 controversies on the other table that you were on, Sammartino and Nick Marchington. Sammartino, tries to call an all-in from Marchington after the dealer misstates what his chip stack was. That whole situation kind of mini exploded with the tournament director getting in, kind of getting on Sammartino's skin. If you're calling 12, you're calling 18 or something like that. What was your take on that whole situation?
It was a very unfortunate one, and also like when you guys are covering 2019, I'd be more than happy to give you background insight on that one as well. But for this specific incident, it was very unfortunate for Sammartino, but like he had no choice but to call it off. Like the rule is like very straightforward, and that's been enforced in nearly all tournaments. I think the needle from Jack, I don't know if that was intentional or not. I'm pretty sure it was unintentional. My read on the situation was telling him, if you choose to call 12, you also have to choose to call 18. It wasn't like if you call 12, like you're just going to call 18, bro. Come on. Like it's not that much difference in chips. But obviously with the situation and with how much money is on the line and with how just like frustrated Sammartino is, like at himself and at the rules, like I don't blame him the slice for taking it the way that he did.
I think the major rule change in that main event compared to say 2016 was the switch to the big blind ante structure for the table. Were you in favor of that change? Does it change the poker gameplay of your style, or is that just kind of a quality improvement overall?
Huge improvement. I hope they never take it away. Not even from a strategic standpoint, but it just speeds up the game. You can very often, especially on like later on in the event, you'll have guys that are going around the table checking their hands, but then they need to post their ante, and it kind of like stalls up the action. And it could take a lot of time just to collect like the individual antes from all the players, make change, et cetera, et cetera. It's so much simpler when you just have one person posting like all the antes and then the blinds. So play definitely sped up because of it, and I hope they don't get rid of it.
I think the other big change on the television side of the standpoint is obviously that main event was broadcasted and edited very differently than years past. If you ever go back and rewatch yourself in these main events, do you prefer the style of 2016 or do you like 2019, or is there kind of a give and take for both of those?
So I enjoy watching both. I'm a very nostalgic poker fan where like I rewatch all the old ESPN episodes.
Good company. Good company here with that.
Yeah, but I enjoy. So if I had to choose one, I would probably choose the edited stuff just because I have that nostalgia that's there. But with that said, I do think that the live streams give you like a better insight into what playing the tournament actually is. It gives a more realistic portrayal as opposed to it being a highlight, because the highlight reels do not give you a good idea of just what it is actually like to play the event. The live stream, like it's a live stream. It shows you literally everything. So is there a bunch of dead time that they need to fill? Yes, but that is the nature of tournaments.
Mhm. And in terms of your experience with ESPN being interviewed, hearing Lon and Norm talk, how was your experience with that in 2019 versus 2016?
I mean, definitely different when they're doing edited comments as opposed to just like doing the live stuff. But overall, I have nothing but positive things to say.
Mhm.
I mean, I I'm the guy that's like treated as the nice guy on ESPN, so it's going to be hard for me to say, oh, I have a problem with what they said about me or anyone else. But the crew is very good about when they're interviewing or asking questions, making sure that you're not involved with actual play, and making sure that you're okay. You can always just turn down the interview if you just want to remain focused. I just personally find it a lot of fun, so I'm more than happy to answer whatever questions they have. And it's like the only time really that I just get to be in that setting where I just ask questions about what it's like to go through this experience that everyone wants to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
you were featured pretty heavily in the first timer segment alongside other players. Do you like that sort of focus on first time players? Would you prefer sort of a more even edit?
So I would even it out, but not even towards like first time as the more experienced players. I think the earlier broadcasts like really did a good job of focusing on like the characters, the people that were like really like bringing a unique persona to it. Much as we hate Kassouf, he definitely brought a unique persona to the 2016 coverage. And I think a lot of the olden days, like you still have your Hellmuths, but you have your Sean Shea Khans, your Matisows, your Negreanu's, and a lot of the characters that we had from the old school WSOP broadcast have just kind of gone to the wayside because they just don't have what it takes anymore. They're not the guys that are going to be featured. And I think because of that, it makes the broadcast just a bit more dry, a bit more stale to actually watch. So like if it were up to me, I think just being able to bring in just more personality to the game is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And so since that 12th place finish in 2019, $600,000 in winnings, did you play in the main event last year?
I've not played in the main event since COVID. No. So the main event's coming up in 2 months. I will be going down for that, but it'll be the first time that I'm playing in 3 years.
Well, given the pattern, for years after your first deep run, you're due for another deep run now, right?
Yeah, but my family is counting on me to take ninth. That is how it works. Every 3 years it's a deep run, and we do 3 spots better. So
well, it's funny because if you combine the winnings, those 2 deep runs, that gets you 1 million. Ninth place usually wins 1 million. So that would be kind of.
I won't say no to $1 million. I definitely won't take it. I have to emphasize to my family who have bought some significant pieces that I'm probably busting. That is probably never happening again. But they have faith in me, and it's a good time either way.
The most viral content on our podcast channel is a Mike Matisow ranting against Max Late Reg in the main event. What is your stance on Max Late Reg?
I actually have not seen this rant. I'm curious. Can you give me a bit of context on this?
So it was the end of day 2. Matisow was kind of yelling at Jeff Platt about his table, and then going into he hates how these amateurs can come in with 50 big blinds on day 2 when he's like trying to fight for his life on with his stack, and he does not like the idea of late registration in the main event on that the first level on day 2.
Yeah. So I think I'll just strongly disagree with Matisow on this. Because I played with guys that have late reg day 2, and it's not even like professionals trying to gain edge. It's amateurs that just don't have the time because you have 4 starting days. So if you play on like one of the first starting days, you have to wait an additional 3 days. The minimum that you have to wait if you play the last day 1 is waiting an additional day before you can play day 2. So those that are most poker players that aren't professionals, they have lives to attend to. So, and I think like the game should be trying to cater to like as many of the recreational players as we can. So like I do not think it's a bad thing in the slightest that you allow for late reg because it just makes life a lot easier for those that don't play professionally and allows them to actually play the main event in a more convenient way.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you've spoken before about, how players at the table are sort of, have their headphones in, sunglasses on. How do you sort of feel we can make the game more entertaining and more open for people to be talking? Is it more catering toward amateurs so that they can play, or how do we do that to liven the table more?
So the trouble you just run into within the poker community is that anywhere where there's a bunch of money that's going to be involved, you're just going to have tryhards. So there's almost no escaping that. I don't really think there's any rule that you can impose to make like everyone follow in order to make the game more enjoyable. I think it's more so like on the individuals just to put themselves out there and just to socialize and not to be just in try hard mode all the time. Because like if someone is just like really socially anxious or just like feels a lot more comfortable in shades and a hat, hoodie, etc., like I don't think that's on me to say no, you can't do that. I think like they are definitely within the right to do whatever they want to do in order to make themselves comfortable. And there are definitely plenty of amateurs that want to do that as well. Like that's the only way that they would show up and actually feel comfortable being in this event. If anything, it's on the standard of professionals that are showing up. It's up to professionals to just be more welcoming and more embracing of the recreational players, as opposed to it being regulated in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, going forward with poker, has Texas Hold'em always been your main game for cash games, and obviously your tournaments have been none of it Hold'em. Do you get involved in other games also online?
I've thought about it, but Texas Hold'em, I continue to learn new things despite playing for almost a decade. So I'm just gonna keep playing until it stops being interesting to me. And I'm sure PLO, short deck, a bunch of other formats are like have their own nuances and things that I could learn in there. But this is my bread and butter. It's been my bread and butter for a long time. Haven't gone burnt out yet, and I'll just continue doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. And so you plan on staying in poker for the short term?
For the short term, like every year, I just look at it and go, all right, like we'll just see what this year brings, because poker it is a volatile career. Like I've had years where I've done extremely well, and I've had other years where I just haven't made money. So you're never truly secure within this, and the poker ecosystem is always changing. There's new opportunities that come about. There are some opportunities that close for you. So you really have to be fluid within this industry in order to survive. Because I've known plenty of people that were professionals 10 years ago that just weren't able to adapt within the community during that time and just no longer play.
Mm-hmm. I know you've dabbled a little bit in poker coaching. What has that been like? How did you get into that? Do you want to do more of that?
I still coach to this day. I spent a bit of time coaching for an hourly, kind of learned that I enjoy it a lot less than just getting to know a couple of guys extremely well and just having a piece of their action. So right now I have 3 students who I coach weekly, and I just have a portion of their action. So they don't even pay me an hourly, and if they lose money, I'm the one that has to front the money for that.
Okay.
But I love teaching. I love coaching. I love talking poker. So the more that I can potentially expand on that, the better. But it can be tough, like finding students that are a good fit, because like you're just not going to get along with everyone, and I do need to be talking with someone with a pretty adequate amount of poker experience for us to really vibe and for me to actually be a benefit to them.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any sort of follow-up with guys like Kassouf in the years since 2016 at all? Any sort of making amends, or just sort of, continuing to be poker rivals? Or
I did make amends the next year. Day one, cameras were obviously on him as he was entering the room in the Amazon. And during sometime during day one, I gave him the handshake that I denied him the year prior. And then I told everyone at the table to clock his ass, and then I just left. But other than that, I haven't had any other encounters with him at the poker table. There was one funny occurrence though. When I was in Barcelona for an EPT with one of my friends. We were in line to register. My girlfriend was with me at the time, and we're waiting outside, waiting for my friend to register for the main event. And then who walks, past us? None other than Will Kassouf. And my girlfriend sees him. This is the first time she's aware of Kassouf, but this is the first time that she's actually seeing him in person, and just has this wide face of almost shock, and then turns to me and says, "I have never had a bigger urge to kick someone in the balls."
Oh my goodness!
And I have not seen Kassouf since.
Okay.
And what about the other players? Have you ever had sort of any conversations with Josephine or Ran again?
Ruan, no. Ruan and I never actually spoke during the run. Like we just played with at the tables, but never actually have like gone to know each other outside of it. Gordon's the one guy that I have been able to catch up with. I got in touch with him during my second deep run. And then after I busted, I spent the next day with him, just like hanging, catching up with him. Found out about just stuff with him that was going on in the background over the last couple of years. And then same with me. He came over to Rail for a bit during the run. Kind of hoping that I run into him this year, because it's been a few years since I actually caught up with the dude. But no one else outside of Gordon.
Okay. And so, what else was I going to ask here? So, your game plan for the 2022 main events. Do you feel like your poker skills continue to evolve, and that you have, what are your expectations for yourself for, future main events? Do you think that, if you play your A plus poker, that you can, match the success you've had so far?
I think that I'm always going to be profitable in the main event. My game is definitely advanced, but that doesn't really guarantee anything in this tournament. Going into like any future main event, like it's show up, make my best decisions, and then just trust whatever comes, and like realistically have no expectations. Like if I can like emphasize anything to anyone playing the main event, is go in with zero expectations, because you really never know what is going to be coming your way, good or bad.
Okay.
Is that sort of your main piece of advice for the main event? Like, if Ben and I have never played the main event, so what advice would you give us, for instance, playing our first main event?
I mean, and that would definitely be the biggest one. I guess the other thing is, if you're not able to trust your game, do not play the main event. You have to go into this event just being like confident about yourself, knowing that you're going to make mistakes, knowing that it's going to be your first time, knowing that there's going to be nerves in play, knowing that I'm sure there, like if you guys played the main event and then, see, I don't know, like Negreanu, Hellmuth, in the background, having some like Star Trek moments as well, just being able to get over that and then just trust that at the end of the day, it's like, you're just playing poker. You're playing the cards. If you get the right run of cards, as we've seen with plenty of amateurs, in this event, like anyone can run deep. So trust yourself, enjoy yourself, make the most of it, because you do not know how long any run is going to be.
No, I'm a very prone to be starstruck. I went to Vegas with my friend who played in the main event this past November, and I just walking around the room, I saw guys like Ruan, Josephine, and I was starstruck just talking to you. I was shaking for the first half hour of the thing. So maybe it's not quite for me, but it's good advice. I appreciate that advice there. All right, Sam, any more questions, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, how would you say that you feel the game has evolved? Did you feel that Kassouf, his fame, do you feel that it changed the dynamic in the room at all? Were players trying to talk more?
Are you talking for future main events?
Yeah, like how you feel has the game evolved in your time playing the main event? How do you think the game will evolve? And do you think that the talk will change with players like Kassouf being so infamous?
So I think that like the table talk, I'm not entirely sure is necessarily going to evolve because of Kassouf. If anything, if it does evolve, I think it will be to spite Kassouf, because imagine sitting at a table and you just have 8 other Kassoufs. That sounds like a nightmare. Like, just kill me already. But I have noticed, like in most deep runs, like it's really rare that I've like watched, especially like late day 7, and it's just dry. I think there is like an appreciation for what the main event is when you do run deep, and more I see guys just like making the most of it, which is wonderful to see. And in terms of there will be like always like poker advancement in terms of like strategy, like that's always going to be evolving. You will see changes in that. But it's I think the main event magic really hasn't disappeared, and I think like that main event magic is what will allow for like some pretty entertaining poker. Maybe not like the best from a technical perspective, but definitely some of the most watchable out there.
On the point of watchable, do you have a favorite main event, sort of from a nostalgic lens? Growing up with poker at all?
Favorite main event. So the first main event I ever watched was 2005 when Hasham one, and that still might hold up as one of my favorites.
It's one of my top three as also.
Yeah,
I'm with you
just
there.
like, and not just because of Hashem, but because there was enough drama to be entertaining. Like, I have that reality TV fanboy in me that enjoys that. I thought like Janiman's story was just incredible. Just a dude that decided to enter the main event. Some other guy like pays for half, or his friend pays for half, and then ends up getting, you know, like 1.7 million out of the deal. And you had
place.
Yep. And then guys like Andrew Black, and then a bunch of other guys that are running deep that were just characters. Yeah, that would be my most entertaining World Series broadcast.
I'm with you though. There's always some great comedy in the early episodes of those classic main events from ESPN. But maybe to your point, do you like or dislike that the main event coverage starts? You know, they pushed up when episode 1 would begin in the main event. It used to be day 1, then they got to day 3, then day 4, then middle of day 4, then day 5. Do you like that, or do you like kind of having the A to Z of the whole main event shown on television?
So I think that like it would have been a bad decision if they didn't show day 1 during the early days of the World Series poker broadcast, because like those days 1 to 4 in like 2004 to 2008 are incredibly entertaining, just for the characters alone. For a live stream, I think that the decision to cut out those days is good, because quite frankly, it's just a lot less dramatic when you have less players getting knocked out, and when there's no money on the line at that point. And especially since like poker's gone, like there's a lot more people that are just solid at the game instead of you seeing like just some crazy ridiculous hands on day 1 or 2. You're more likely to see crazy ridiculousness later on in the event. So I think it's actually I would not watch the stream if it's day 1, 2, or 3. Like, I personally don't even tune in to like day 5 or day 6 when serious money is on the line.
What would you say is your favorite line from Norman Chad?
Oh man, I don't know how many people would actually know this reference. It was just, it's like such a one-off. This was, I think, 2000 and what was the year that Joseph Chung ran deep and Duchamel won? 2010. Where Pascal gets it in Queen Jack against Kings to bust 12 or something like that. He's obviously like in a rage and is like disappointed that he just punted. And then as he's exiting, there's like he just slams the door open. Meanwhile, like the door next to him is open, and Norman Chad's like, "Huh, the other door was open." Like, I don't know why that sticks out as like one of my favorite lines, but that was the first thing that came up when you asked me.
No, I like it. First instinct. Yeah, there's some great lines over the years, but it's the smaller lines sometimes that kind of stick with you too. I understand that.
Yeah, I will say that Norman Chad and Lon McCarran love those guys. They are a lot more effective during the edited broadcast than they are the live streams. I think that Jamie Herstetter does a great job for the live streams, and the dynamic that she has with Norm is great. Yes. With Lon is great. I think Norm kind of stands out as this guy that's like there trying to make commentary, but it's not nearly as effective as it was in the edited coverage.
I do love Mia Spandiari in the coverage booth on the small tables. I thought he was always great. And unfortunately, he's not in there as much. I guess being a family man kind of takes away from his time to be.
A family man, and then once you win the one drop, you think you're too big of a deal, I guess.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So, something I should mention to you guys, if you're not tuning in, do you guys watch the Hustler Live Casino stream at all?
I do not.
Just on occasion, every now and again.
Yeah, there's one going down today that I'm definitely watching. They're bringing on a bunch of content creators along with some known guys. They managed to get Hellmuth, they managed to get Dwan, and then they got like big creators like Mr. Beast, Ludwig, other guys, and they're all playing 100-200 cash game, and that should make for some very entertaining poker. So if you're looking for characters, if you're looking for action, like I'm not advertising for them, I'm not affiliated in any way, but I would definitely recommend checking the stream out.
This is an ad-free, politics-free podcast, and you're bringing
okay. All right, good.
That's all good. Oh no, that's good. Yeah, no, I definitely want to check that out. Phil Hellmuth has always been my favorite player, just from an entertainment point of view. He's obviously kept his head in the big games and and all the productions, high stakes duel, poker after dark, all that stuff. I love watching him. Even when he loses, I'm happy. Do you have a favorite player of all time?
I've been a Negreanu fan for a very long time. Like I've gone in and out as to how much of a fan I have of him, but like there's no denying that he's been one of the old school players that has really been able to hold up in the tournament world for a very long time, and definitely deserves his place in the Poker Hall of Fame. I find Negrano like way more entertaining than Hellmuth. Hellmuth, I am very polarized on. Some days I enjoy him, other days I'm just annoyed as hell when I'm watching him on the coverage. Whereas Negrano, I could watch him play like tournaments all day.
Fair enough. Yeah.
How about you, Sam?
Oh, my favorite's Jamie Gold. I love. I'm pulling the trigger here. His 06 run is the most entertaining run from a poker player of all time. Just gotta say it. He beats Kassouf.
Yeah. Oh, he had more table talk than Kassouf, that's for sure, and better cards.
Yes, of course. God, that hand against Prahlad Friedman where he flops the straight, like, oh my God, like, God.
You know, we might actually have a rival for knowledge of these classic main event episodes here, Sam.
I know. It's awesome, man.
I told you I was an old school fanboy.
No, that's us
too. Watching since 05.
Yeah, no, I watched since 04, so I guess I got you beat there. But besides that, no, it's we've rewatched hundreds of episodes of poker. We're going to continue, and again, we saw the last 5 years to cover before we're up to all caught up.
Before up to speed, and then you guys got to play yourself, make your own content.
I did play one tournament when I was in Vegas last year, just one of the small $200 dailies, and it didn't go so well, but it was fun, for my first real tournament. So,
you guys have any ambitions of playing the main?
I don't think I have the courage, the heart for it. I've been playing poker since I was 12. Just for with friends online for play money and stuff. I don't think that is for me. I just too conservative with my money, with my with that for me to really to do it. But I garner much enjoyment watching folks like you play. It's just one of my favorite television shows of all time. And much like any reality show, every year is a new season, and if you don't like one year, the next year is going to come around.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to ask you one more question. I know this is a very tough question, but what is the best Pokemon, and why is it Mewtwo?
I'm gonna disagree.
I like Pikachu too. I'm a Pikachu man myself, but Mewtwo, man, he's.
I will accept Mewtwo. Mewtwo is a very, very solid choice.
No, I do love your decorations back there. Love the
yeah,
Mario,
thank you.
Love the Pikachu. Is that like a needlepoint Mario on the wall there?
Like the picture or the figurine?
The picture. Is that Mario Kart on the right there?
Yeah, that's Mario Kart. Yeah, my girlfriend actually made that
wow.
out of little beads, so it's like pixel art that she made for me.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's another one that actually you can't see off to the screen here that she also made for me.
Wow,
wonderful.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice office space that she helped me decorate.
That is fantastic. Again, I think it's been an hour and a half here. I'm so thankful for you to dedicate your afternoon to us. We really appreciate it. When we began this podcast, we really had no idea where it would go, what we could do, and people else like you have given us so much entertainment over these past years of my life, and I'm really appreciative for you guys creating good TV and getting back to us. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me on. And I'd say give yourself a pat on the back for actually just reaching out, because I think a lot of guys are open just to being on stuff like this. Because we outside of the main event, there aren't really too many opportunities that a lot of us poker players just have to talk about like anything within the poker community. So there's definitely a lot more than myself that are willing to engage like this.
And for the record, Kassouf declined to be on this show, so you haven't beaten that respect.
Okay. I am not too surprised.
Anyway, thank you so much, and to our listeners, next time we'll be covering the 2017 main event. Really, in my eyes, the last great main event broadcast in the sort of style that as we've seen it. Sam, any final words you want to say?
No, I mean, thank you for coming on, Mike. I mean, this was a great time talking to you. Feel free to check out our previous content. If you have any comments or anything you want to leave on our videos, you can always do that. And if you ever want to be on the show again, let us know. Do you have anything you want to plug or anything you want to say to guests?
No, nothing to plug. I ain't running a company over here. I'm just a poker player trying to make ends meet and have a good time, man.
Right.
But no, this was a lot of fun. It was a pleasure meeting you guys.
Yeah.
And like anytime you guys do want to have me on, just send me a message and I'll see what I can do.
No, when we cover 2019 in more detail, probably a few months from now, we'll definitely hit you up at there. And we might be going to Las Vegas for the main event, not to play in it, but to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're there, we'll definitely keep an eye out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that about wraps it up here, guys. Enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, and enjoy your your poker on TV.
All right, yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.